I request Dr. J.S. Pandey sir to deliver the lecture, inaugural lecture to the participants. Sir, please.
Good morning to you once again. Actually, this lecture was to be by Dr. Rakesh Kumar, our director on oil spill case studies. He had done some case studies on Mangalore's damage due to oil spill. But I told you he's in Calcutta on 7th. Maybe he will make it possible to come and talk to you. So we'll try to see how we can show the video of his lecture which he gave yesterday, last time, so that may be useful to you. I will briefly speak on coastal pollution, if there is some time, on CRZ issues, and essentially on climate change problem. So the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. Like we are indulging in parali debates that it is someone else's problem, they will solve it, we are facing it. Most of the time we tend to shift the burden from our own shoulders to different people. The story of environment and climate change is essentially a story of 7 blind men and an elephant. And I don't know how many of you have read the story. Younger generation doesn't seem to be familiar with that story. We used to read it, it used to be taught to us. There was an elephant and 7 blind men were asked to describe the elephant. So they cannot see the elephant, so they touch different organs of the elephant and accordingly they construct the definition of the elephant. Someone touches the trunk, someone the legs. So for one who touches the trunk, the elephant is like a trunk. Someone touches the legs, so it's like so they have their different descriptions. Similar problem is with environment and climate change. People belonging to different disciplines, a chemist will have a different version of the environmental problem, physicist his own, electrical engineer his own, like that. Conventionally, it is believed that environmental engineering is a civil engineering problem. But that is where the problem lies. Actually, environmental engineering is an electronics engineering problem. An ecosystem almost works like an integrated circuit. Some species have their roles as transistors, resistors. Some species have their roles as amplifiers. Like when you sow a seed, it grows into a plant and then gives so many fruits. And there are so many seeds, and again you can have so many plants. It is amplifier's property. Sun is an oscillator, which drives everything on the ecological system. The sun is an oscillator. Actually, most of our engineering interventions are nothing but the imitations of what is happening in the nature, and we call it our engineering innovations. But actually, planes fly like birds, submarines like fishes. So we have seen natural processes happening and we have converted them into some engineering application, and then we feel no end of it and we forget about the nature. That is the mistake which we have done. Actually, no one can defeat the natural engineering. In other words, it's known as ecological engineering also. Dealing with ecosystem or environmental system is almost like dealing with human health. That is how the discipline of ecosystem health analysis has come. Why does temperature of our body rise? Because any disease you suffer from will ultimately result in your body temperature rising. Similar is the problem with Earth's temperature rising. It's not that someone has come and warmed it up. You don't need to sit near an oven so that you get fever. You can get fever by having some stomach infection also inside. That Earth's temperature is rising is basically that everything is wrong with the Earth system. We have disturbed, just now only I was talking to you about biogeochemical cycles. We have disturbed all biogeochemical cycles. That spring which you were seeing in the first slide, actually all of those, if you recall your 12th standard study, there was something called simple harmonic motion. Signal is a very smooth signal and all biogeochemical cycles had that kind of a pattern. You can take the simplest pattern, radiation. In the morning, the radiation is at this level, goes on rising, then 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, it is at the peak, then it comes down by the evening, and then again it follows the same kind of pattern. So smooth signals were there for all the natural processes. All that smoothness has gone now because we have constructed urban conglomerates here and there. And if you are familiar with heat island effect, these signals, environmental signals, the temperature humidity patterns for one particular region in the same city would be much different from the other city. And that leads not only to the vertical mixing problem, it leads to the mechanical mixing, it is called the lateral mixing problem. That's why most of the pollutants, they get trapped. And that's the reason why in certain localities, only in a given city also or in a given block also, there is one particular location which keeps on stinking. Air pollution doesn't go from there, from Delhi it doesn't reach Patna, it gets confined, right? It's not reaching. That means there are some local boundary conditions which are stopping the pollution to spread. And those boundary conditions are not at the city limits. They are even at the mohalla limits and the block limits also. These are the meteorological barriers which are preventing the pollution to spread in that free fashion which they were doing earlier. So that is essentially, people think climate change problem is just temperature is rising by 0.5 degrees C or 2.5 degrees C. That's not a climate change problem. Climate change problem is perturbations in all the biogeochemical cycling. The carbon cycling has got disrupted, the hydrological cycle has got disrupted, nitrogen cycle has got it. If you disturb one cycle, all other cycles will get disturbed. That's the story of climate change. So climate change problem, and those who are dealing with it in terms of temperature rise to 0.5, 1.5 point, will never get the solution because they have really not understood the problem. And if you have not understood the problem, you will never get the solution. And this I am watching for past 32 years at least, that basic understanding is only missing. We did some exercise about which I will talk to you later, but before that, these are some exercises related to ecological footprinting. But let us first look at the oil spill problem for which we have this training program. You have numbers of large spills, over 700 tons, from 1970 to 2011. It's very pleasing to see that incidents have decreased over the years, not so many, maybe because of our technological sophistication or the methodologies which have learned for disaster management or risk mitigation. But this is the scenario. Then you have what are the causes for these spills? Because you can remediate a situation only when you know the causes. If you don't know the causes, what kind of remedial measures you will take? So there are fire explosions, collisions, groundings, hull failures, equipment failures. Unknown is 64%. So even if we are 100% efficient, we can only deal with 36%. And that also is true. In no area we are 100% efficient. So you can imagine how much problem we would ultimately be able to solve. But still, whatever we can do, we should try to solve. This is the scenario of oil spill problems. Now, for marine pollution, what are the sectors which are contributing? It is almost like a source apportionment exercise. For water, doing source apportionment is not as difficult as it is for air. Air, God knows from where the air is coming. But for water, you can do it slightly more precisely. So they have done this exercise. So they find that 44% discharges are from land-based discharges. That means we are indulging in mismanagement of land. That's what is the reason for environmental pollution. So the solution for environmental pollution then essentially lies in land use management. So you can see water pollution problem, solution is on the land. So we have to accordingly pinpoint the causes and take remedial measures. Atmosphere 33% because acid rain and aerosol scavenging and all those things. When microorganisms, or sometimes what happens is from one coast with water vapors, one particular kind of a microorganism will fly into the air. Then when it precipitates, from Pacific Ocean it may fall in Indian Ocean, God knows. So the different microorganisms, like we are traveling, Indians are traveling to America and vice versa. The microorganisms are also without visa, they are traveling from here to there, and that's why we are encountering every now and then new kinds of diseases, chikungunya, dengue, because we had not heard of these diseases when we were your age. But now we have sophisticated medicines, and along with that we have sophisticated diseases also very difficult to diagnose and treat because of this microbial aberrations taking place all over the world. Maritime transportation, offshore production and dumping in the ocean, 10%. Impact due to associated and ancillary port activities, breakwaters. We did an environmental management, we prepared an environmental management plan for Mumbai port actually. So this is part of that exercise which we did. So we had looked into these issues and suggested some measures to them. Impact due to associated and ancillary port activities, breakwaters and landfills may change current patterns and cause stagnation of water behind structures. In Kerala backwaters, this kind of problem would be there, and there could be breeding ground for many diseases. If municipal or industrial effluents flow into a port, stagnant port water may further deteriorate. Municipal sewage also brings coliform bacteria into the port and may lead to unacceptable contamination of the harbor. See, this is the way we are discharging. This is just one photograph. So you can imagine how many photographs would be there on all over the world. In many parts of the globe, sewage flows into the ocean, seas and gulf untreated or undertreated. For example, 80% of urban sewage discharged into the Mediterranean Sea is untreated. 80%. Sewage can lead to eutrophication and ultimately many types of microorganism-related human diseases. And you can see people are diving also under those conditions. Then contamination from various chemicals including pesticides. Pesticides, herbicides and many other chemicals are used in common consumer products. Some of these chemicals including radioactive waste find their way through runoff to the sea or ocean, and then that land-based discharges with around 44%. Oceans have been very convenient dumping ground for waste generated on land, and you can just see the examples of. Then there are issues related with bioaccumulation and bioconcentration. Now single-use plastic and plastic, they have become the in thing these days, and you can see the impact of plastics and the way we are disposing plastic on the land and the oceans. One of the most important contaminants, pollutants are the nets and plastics, which can be swallowed and caught in an animal's whales, dolphins, seals, turtles, etc. In digestive system, there is an accumulation of various toxic materials also. For example, mercury, dioxin, PCBs, PAs, and even radioactive substances. Small species at the bottom of the food chain, such as planktons in the ocean, absorb the chemicals as they feed. The chemicals accumulate in these organisms and become much more concentrated in their bodies than in the surrounding water as well. So as they travel through the trophic level, actually their concentration increases. These organisms are eaten by small animals, and the concentration rises again in those animals because they have the tendency for accumulation and the capacity for accumulation in their stomach. These animals are in turn eaten by larger animals, and this leads to even further increased chemical load in them, sometimes even million times higher. So it's because in the smaller levels it will be microgram, and in the higher animals it will be grams or kilograms. Polar bears which feed on seals can have contamination levels up to billion times higher than their environment. Now, what are the likely impacts of oil pollution? When there is an oil spill on water, spreading immediately takes place. The gaseous and liquid components evaporate. Some get dissolved in water and even oxidize. Some undergo bacterial changes and eventually sink to the bottom by gravitational action. So air, water, sediments, all of them get contaminated in turn. Harmful effects of oil spill. Oil kills plants and animals in the estuarine zone. Oil settles on beaches and kills organisms that live there. It also settles on ocean floor and kills benthic bottom-dwelling organisms such as crabs. Oil poisons algae and disrupts the major food chain. It also coats birds, impairing their flight or reducing the insulative property of their feathers. This makes them more vulnerable to cold. Oil endangers fish hatcheries in coastal waters and contaminates the flesh of commercially valuable fish. So it affects fisheries production also finally, and many times that's why I think it is advisable to be a vegetarian rather than a non-vegetarian because of the bioaccumulation and biotransfer problems. One of the most significant impact is on mangroves. Pollution is a current cost and a future threat. It is an environmental tragedy. We have 17,000 drilling platforms in the ocean. 17,000. I mean, this is an old data actually. And 1,000 more are under consideration. So you can imagine by now how many of them would have come. Interaction of radiation, humidity and CO2 at land, air, land, water and water, air interfaces, and health of our fisheries and in turn human beings who survive on fishes. So there are long-term economic and environmental effects of oil spill. At least 4.2 million gallons of oil are already in the Gulf of Mexico having unpredictable ecological damage. The seafood, fishing, shrimp and oyster industries in the Gulf are being destroyed. Seafood is a $2.4 billion industry in the state of Louisiana. And Louisiana produces more than 30% of the seafood originating in the continental United States. And now we convert into rupees, so it will be a trillion economy. We are all the time talking about the economy running into trillions. Global food chain is continuously getting poisoned. Tourism along the Gulf Coast is almost dead. It is pertinent to mention that seafood and tourism are two of the most important industries in the Gulf region, and they have highly got impacted because of this oil pollution problem. Oil exploration is going to be more risky and challenging venture. Oil prices are likely to keep on continuously rising. We can witness them now. I think petrol, when they rise by 10 rupees, and when they fall by 0.25 paise. Oil prices are likely to keep on continuously rising as demand continues to increase while supply is reducing day by day. See how we have created this problem. To produce 1 drop of oil, just guess how much time it will take. 1 drop of oil, how much time it must be taking to?
Thousands of years. Thousands of years.
Billions of years. Coal through photosynthesis, and all of them, we call them fossil fuels, but actually they are also nothing but another form of solar energy only. Solar energy which falls on plants, so it turns into photosynthesis, then the plants fossilize, it turns into coal, it falls in, solar energy falls on algae, and then they fossilize, they convert into oil. So what you get as coal energy and oil energy is actually solar energy, and converted over billion years. And with what speed we are consuming? Within microseconds. Will that society be ever sustainable? Just think over it. And we want sustainability to arrive and knock at our door all the time. Without thinking that what is that we are doing? What? Food takes billion years to be made, and we are eating in microseconds. And so many of us, billion times, trillion times. So imagine, multiply with the population we are doing. And everyone in his 2-wheeler or 4-wheeler, whatever. So can you ever have sustainability? So our emission, there is something called assimilative capacity, the potential of the ecosystem to absorb pollutants. And there's something called emission potential, the potential of the activity to generate emission. In the natural environment, before industrialization and these strange concepts of development came into being, almost the rate of emission was matching with the rate of assimilation. So you had a balanced environment. You had a balanced carbon cycle, you had a balanced hydrological cycle, you had a balanced nitrogen cycle. Now, there is so much of imbalance. By the time the ecosystem is able to absorb 1 microgram, you have generated several billion tons emission. How much will it sustain? And those kind of problems are being manifested. NCR is the first step Now it will finally go to Trivandrum also gradually. So it will travel through the map of India and go to Trivandrum, or it may go to the other countries on west side, because we are not able to match the sinking potential of ecosystem with the pollution generating potential of any system, ecosystem for that matter, or all the great technologies we have all over the world. We have so many great scientists, and many of them have got Nobel Prize. Some are in the process of getting. But still, do you have a city where the environment today is better than the environment yesterday? Any city on the world? Continuously we are deteriorating. So are we acquiring really the right knowledge? That means there is something amiss with the kind of knowledge which we are acquiring. There is something wrong if it is not solving our problem. And blindlessly we are following the same route. No one is questioning, no one is changing. So it's like a lamb. One lamb moves, runs, falls in a well. All the lambs which are following will fall in the same. When in my childhood, I used to watch few natural scenario very well. That time I was not an ecologist, not an environmentalist, but I used to watch because watching is my hobby. Those insects which come after rainy season. Have you watched them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So they are also fond of glamour. They will. We had one tube light and one yellow light bulb. So they don't sit on the bulb, they go to the tube light because they're fond of glamour like we are. So to say, next day all the insects are dead. And this process has been going on for years, for billion years. The insects coming today refuse to learn anything from the insects which were died yesterday. You put a piece of jaggery on the table. In no time, billions of ants will come and get glued to it. 60% would be dead in no time. But the ants coming towards the jaggery today refuse to learn anything from the ants which died just before that. Probably, God knows, human beings' situation is almost similar. And if you look at our photographs from Saturn and satellites around Saturn, you see we are minuscule. The Earth itself looks like a dot. So imagine what would be our sizes. It would be smaller than the ants also. We think no end of ourselves, but that is our size. So we have one of the most important contaminant pollutant are the nets and plastics, which can be swallowed and caught in an animal's, whales, dolphins, seals, turtles, etc. There is an accumulation of various toxic materials also, for example, mercury dioxide, PCBs, PHS, and even radioactive substances. This is the scenario with the coastal pollution. You have oil pollution, you have nuclear waste being dumped, you have industrial waste being dumped, you have wastewater discharges, household waste being dumped, then pesticide being dumped, then sometimes animal dung also being dumped. So farming also, some people find fault with agricultural farming also. God knows how they will live tomorrow. So the first exercise when I joined, Chaturvedi ji was asking me what I started doing in this institute in 1987. The first exercise which was given to me, my Professor Khanna, was to develop ecological models. So I started reading some material and then I came across something called predator-prey model. There are some 10 foxes in the forest and then around some 50 rabbits in the forest. The foxes survive on the rabbits. The rabbits are tasty, they eat away some 10, 20 odd rabbits. Still some rabbits are left because they indulge in reproduction and all that. So a population dynamics or balance is maintained between the fox and rabbit population. One day, most of the foxes, they get greedy because the flesh is tasty, rabbits are tasty. I don't know how many of you have tasted. I have not tasted. I am strictly vegetarian, but I feel it is tasty. So the foxes, they ate away all the rabbits in the forest. Now there are no rabbits left for reproduction. So the rabbits are not being born. And a time came when the foxes also starved and died away. Similar story is with industrialization and agricultural system or the forestry ecosystem. Now if you look deeply into the process which makes money, how money is made? You need some paper, you need some dyes, you need some printing material, all of them are forestry products. So the more money you have in the society, that more forestry degradation has taken place. Otherwise you cannot have. So the ecology is rabbit and economy is fox. There are so many foxes in the society today, you know, every day there is a news. So you can have local foxes and rabbit story, but this is a global story I am talking about. So for forestry ecology is the rabbit and economy is the foxes. To some extent, both can survive, that is symbiosis. But we have reached a level which is thermodynamically irreversible. You pull my hand like this, I can bring it down. You put it like this, I can still bring it down. But if you break it, then it's gone. Now ecosystem also we have to be very careful whether we have really broken it beyond its resilience. That's called the resilience or the resistance of the ecosystem. So the ocean, so this we have to remember, the development paradigm has to be, by development what do we mean? More and more money. This was very strange thing. You know, I really not understood, not that I'm against money, but basically I'm a mathematician, so I look for a relationship between whether money and human development has any relationship. If I have 100 rupees, suppose I smile once in a day. If you give me 200 rupees, are you sure I will smile 2 times a day? I see most of the people who have $1 billion or $1 trillion are very difficult smile. Slum dwellers smile much more frequently than those people do because they're all the time frowning. So there is no relationship. If I have 1,000 rupees, I will live for 20 years. If I have 1 lakh, I will live for so many. Does it happen? Do whatever amount of money you amass and you make or whatever you do, 80 years, 90 years, at best 100 years, this is what will survive. You can. So beyond that, money has absolutely no role to play in human welfare. Why is mindlessly we are chasing that thing? So if I develop a technology and I want to sell it to you, you will ask me, for give 1x input, will it give 2x output or not? For 2x, will it give 4x or not, or more than that? Otherwise you will not purchase. When we start earning money, do we question that? Like, if I am earning 1,000 rupees, it makes me happier by one amount. If I earn 10,000 rupees, then should it not make me happier by really, does it do it? If it does not do it, then we are chasing a wrong thing in our life. Am I right? Do you agree with me? This is where we are wrong. So this reminds me of one very strange story. There's an old lady. Earlier days we used to have trees used to be grown, and then around them there used to be some cemented structure. In Hindi we used to call it chabutra. Okay, in the villages people used to sit and then discuss and have deliberations, and their conferences and training program used to happen under a tree. We are having it under this artificial setup, but they used to have it. So one old lady was sitting there and stitching something. The dusk time is when the evening and the day they meet together. So twilight time, suddenly the needle falls from her hand, and there were 2 such chabutras, the cemented structure, 2 trees on where she was sitting. There was a lamp, but it was not lighting, and there was another tree where the lamp was aglow. So when the nettle fell down, she started searching for it. So she was going round and round. Suddenly a young fellow reached there. So this old lady is doing something. She said, "Auntie, what you are doing?" She said, "Nettle has fallen, son, and then I am trying to locate that nettle. Want to find it out." She said, "Can I help you?" She says, "Surely, because I'm an old lady, I'm not able to do that physical exertion." So he also takes some few rounds, and then out of curiosity he asked the auntie, "Where exactly did your needle fall?" Now where they are searching is that where the light is, the ample light is there, and then going around. And from there the lady points out, "Son, under that tree I was doing stitching, so the needle fell." So he asked more curiously, then if the needle fell there, why are you searching here? He said, there is no light there, so we cannot search there. So we can search only where the light is there. The problems are India. And we are searching for solutions in America because America is more lighted, more aglow, there is more illumination, there is more glamour. Will we ever get the solution? Because our needle has fallen in our backyard in India. For most of the problems, we are trying to seek solution. And the story of India and America is as good as the story of, it can be a story of Kerala, Delhi and Punjab also. Problem is somewhere else. We are looking for solution somewhere else. We will never be able to get the solution if we are not able to locate, pinpoint the problem which we are facing and the location of the problem where it has got generated, because you have to arrest the problem from where it has emanated. So otherwise you have absolutely no hold, because the problem will spread in a very strange fashion. So we have ocean pollution due to oil pollution, marine debris, toxic materials, ocean dumping and mining, tanker spills, runoff from land, and industrial waste. Then I already told you about the issues related to bioaccumulation and bioconcentration. One of the most important contaminants and pollutants are the nets and plastics, and I think I have already talked to you about it. So once again, the overview of total sea pollution. And this is the group of experts on the scientific aspects of marine pollution, which is SAM. So land-based 44%, atmospheric inputs 33%, marine transport 12%, dumping 10%, and exploration and production 1%, but I don't trust it, because they have put 1% probably thinking that they can do more and more exploration. There are a lot of stories how this kind of statistics are also generated. We should not trust it. When you purchase a fridge, 5-star fridge, and you put it in your house, and I come and ask you, as a curious citizen, please prove to me that it is a 5-star fridge. Will you ever be able to prove?
No.
So most of the time we are getting fooled by the kind of statistics which is being floating around us, including on the WhatsApp and Google. So we have to generate that capacity to question, verify, sometimes quantify ourselves the kind of statistics which is there around us. And that was the kind of exercise which I had started doing. Many of the earlier quantification I will question, I will develop my own models, and I will not trust already developed software also. So many air quality models have been developed for time immemorial. Water quality models. Still water quality problem is increased only, it has not decreased. What is the use spending and wasting money on those kind of exercises? We have to change our academic scenario in such a way which results in meaningful societal, environmental contributions, rather than mindlessly following that Western concept of the teaching which is being dumped down our throat. We have to be very careful. So this is how the food chain gets affected once the ocean system gets affected. And this is the scenario of coastal development. You can see what we have done to the coastal areas. And will it be sustainable? You don't actually need any technology or mathematical theory to tell you that there is a problem. I will show you some more slides also. On the lower bottom you have Mumbai mangroves. Do you need one carrying capacity study to tell you that it has gone beyond carrying capacity? Most of the time the kind of studies which we are undertaking are redundant studies, because you can see the bioindicators and you can yourself feel where is the problem and how the problem has to be solved, rather than taking recourse to sophisticated online monitoring system, sophisticated air quality, water quality models, finally not able to understand what is there in that black box. When the cause and effect relationship is right before you, you know where the problem is, what the solution is, and that kind of mitigation measures, they need to be adopted. Not most of the time, not exactly what the Western world is giving you. And you can see how this our commercial capital looks at the backyard. This is another name of development. And this is law of conservation of energy. If you are developing in one end, you have to pay the price at the other end. This is simply the law of conservation of energy. You watch your air conditioner, it cools on one side, on the other side, because this law of physics, simple law of physics. You cannot have cooling all over the world. And why you have cooling? Because your human cells have been made in such a way that they should get exposed to that optimum temperature, not lower than a tropical species. They have their own temperature tolerance characteristics. The temperate species, they have their own temperate characteristics. You just cannot have same kind of cooling and air conditioner for everyone. And if we save energy, air conditioning energy in all our airports, I will tell you, probably it will result in lower haze in Delhi. So much of energy consumption unnecessarily is taking place. On airports, when we sit down waiting for our next flight, and someone has to take out his sweater, someone has to, I always carry a very soft wind cheater, because God knows where it will be cooler than you want. In many committee rooms, in many offices, unnecessarily they will put that lower temperature, and then they will put the sweater also. So what was a normal situation? You have already wasted energy for air conditioner, and then you have wasted more energy for this textile industry also. Textile is one of the most polluting sectors among the industries. You should remember that also. So for another easy solution is, don't play IPL during nights. Why can't you play during sunrise? Best solar energy utilization. Unnecessarily so much of energy is being wasted. On the other hand, you will ask a fellow in the slums to put off his light every now and then, and there will be energy day, earth day and all that. I have gone to this shop, switched off one bulb. So much of energy is being wasted in IPL. Just shift the timing. Play during the sun. That's the utilization of solar energy. You will not do that. Then you will ask a NEERI scientist to develop a solar technological means to sustain that. This is where we are going wrong. Most of our environmental problems are actually mental problems. We do not know. Most of us, you ask us, truly it might be including me also, ask us, what are the problems we are facing? We will not be able to define. If I ask you what is the problem you are facing, you ask me also, probably I will not be able to. When we do not know what problems we are facing, what solutions we will find out. Similarly, the similar story is with environmental problems. When you do not know what the problems are, where the problems are, how they have originated, what kind of solutions will provide? We have to generate an entirely different educational system, which does not mean just collecting degrees, diplomas and certificates from various institutions, including IITs and IIMs. How many IIM graduates have really met to the top of the leadership anywhere in India or in America? So what is the use of management studies? People who do not have any degrees can manage you, they are managing you. This shows there is a black hole in our educational system. We are being taught which is not useful for the society. We are being taught which is not leading us anywhere. So the solution, many times I tell people, the solutions to environmental pollution problems does not lie in the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. They lie in the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Human Resources Development. Then you must be puzzling. Harbhajan Singh is puzzled now why Ministry of Defense has come, because they have to safeguard our borders. There is something called Human Development Index, and Human Development Index is quantified on the following parameters: our socio-economic status, educational status, health status, and employment generating potential. Now, n number of times we are saying as human species we are developing. We are developing, that means in all these parameters we must be developing. Health, God knows, because the moment you have more and more hospitals coming every day indicates that your health is not right. The more needs for medicines you have and doctors you have, that's a negative indicator, which we are projecting as positive indicator. That's the problem with the quantification. Education system, if we are really more developed, then we must be developed in educational terms. Now, if we are developed in educational terms, should we have more tendencies for fighting or less? More or less? Less tendency. So our defense budget should increase or decrease? Should decrease, because we have less, we are developed people, we are better educated, so we should fight less. So our defense budget should decrease. Now all the nations, if they sit down together and say we are all developed, and instead of increasing our defense budget, which they are usually doing every year, from next year we will go on reducing our defense budget by 5%. Believe me, no technological intervention will ever match the kind of pollution reduction this step will bring. Most of the equipments and materials used in defense setup are carcinogenic, hazardous, highly pollution generating. And if you have 5% reduction, because you can imagine the defense budget, the amount of defense budget we have. And I always tell people that respect for environment is just directly proportional to the ratio of the budget allocated for Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Environment. That is the respect we have for the environment. So you reduce this. This is the best technology. You can call it human technology. Reduce by 5%. But it will not happen. Why it will not happen? Because with education we have got a very good qualification that is called mistrust. Anywhere you go, you have CCTV camera, directly proportional to mistrust. We are not trusting anyone. So that's why we have installed. Society with great degrees and all that finally is flooded with mistrust all around. Why it has come about? Because our primary education has been totally faulty. Why primary education has been faulty? Who becomes a primary school teacher? Imagine. How many of us would like to become a primary school teacher? Because they're so low paid. So who becomes a primary school teacher? And what kind of problems they must be facing themselves, physical, mental and spiritual. Now if they are facing those kind of problems, the children whom they are nurturing, you think they will impart something very positive to the children. So most of us, excluding me, I was lucky to get a dedicated primary school teacher. So I could somehow combat the threats of environmental pollution and mental pollution. Most of the children are exposed to this kind of teachers. Now whatever habits or intellects or academics which you learn within 10 years, it doesn't move. Am I right? They are the long lasting habits we have formed. Even toothpaste we don't, very seldom we. Those 10 formative years of human personality is very important. And if we do not culture and nurture those 10 years, we have lost the game. So it's a marathon. If you have been pushed behind by some, say, 100, 200 meters in the beginning only, you can never win the race. So this is where the problem is. Now, if your foundations are wrong, no matter how high your castle is, what storied building you have constructed, 200, 300 storied and all, the foundations are in the sand, the building can collapse anywhere. So no matter whether we acquire degrees from IITs, IIMs, wherever, if our primary school education has not been proper, we really cannot be a responsible citizen in terms of Swachhata Abhiyan. Because we haven't taught totally different things. So for protecting environment, for conserving environment, for tackling environmental pollution, what we need is a revamped primary education system, which is the responsibility of Ministry of Human Resources Development. So the solution to environmental pollution problems actually lie in Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Human Resources Development. Unless until these two ministries do not take up this exercise, our Swachhata Abhiyan probably would not be as successful as we want it to be. So that's the essence of environmental pollution combat. Now our methodology, we did that carbon vulnerability exercise. So what we did is data from very important some important coastal regions were collected on various parameters, and we subsequently quantified something called methane emission potential, MEPs. When we talk of ecosystem health risk assessment, why we do in all this environmental monitoring, modeling, whatever we do, environmental management, because our final aim is to protect human beings. And they get impacted by air, water, soil, plants and animals in the following fashion. So there is something called, when we do risk assessment, there is something called exposure risk assessment. And if you know the dose response characteristics of various chemicals, those dose response relationships, if they are clubbed with exposure risk assessment, that's the ultimate health risk assessment. Very rarely in India this exercise has been done. And most of our environmental impact assessment exercises have created beautiful reports without having done this exercise. And if we really do not do this exercise, actually we are not doing justice, any justice to doing environmental impact assessment, because we are still groping in the darkness and floating in the air. And these are some interactions, air emissions from multiple sources, there are wet depositions, dry depositions, and many a times you see with this air quality models, water quality models, there are n number of uncertainties associated with the quantification of various coefficients which define dry deposition, wet deposition and such related processes. Details of local conditions and environmental quality grid-wise. This is how the data collection exercise was done. Collection of descriptive information and quantitative data. Data analysis. Examine data from relationship between environmental deterioration, climate impacts and ecosystem health. Discuss and share draft findings with team members regarding initiation of response planning. Very rarely it is done, because most of the time when we want response management and planning, we are always in a hurry. So there is no time for doing this exercise. So if you do not have the time, what kind of report you will generate and what kind of plans you will make if you are all the time in. One of my medical friends told me that most of the problems in the society are because of the following three factors: hurry, worry and curry. Most of the time we are in hurry, morning to the evening. बच्चे को स्कूल छोड़ना है, husband को जाना है, wife को जाना है, hurry, and that creates worry. Most of the time we worry. And curry, we can't. It's a oil spill problem for coastal areas. We also have oil related problems. Most of our problems are actually oil related problems. Fat accumulation, most of the problems are because of the extra fat which we are generating and accumulating ourselves, the bioconcentration of fat, biomagnification, bioamplification of fat. So it's a oil problem outside, we have oil problem inside also, and we have to tackle that problem. So carbon vulnerability assessment on the overall stretch of based on carbon footprinting. Data requirements, pollution load, region-specific waste generation, region-specific population, waste characteristics. Then perturbations in biogeochemical cycling, data requirements, heavy metal concentration, etc. EMP based on cause and effect relationships, structural modeling approach, and ecosystem health assessment. This is structural modeling approach. Problem definition, model purpose definition, verbal model, identification of systems elements, structural interconnection, state variables, intermediate variables, parameters, exogenous forcing functions, wherever applicable. Causal loop diagram, cause-effect relationships, functional relations and quantification, data analysis, interpretation and application. You will see most of the modeling exercises being done. Very rarely they take reports to this. So they are basically grappling, they have become computer operators. They get a software and they start running. So give some defined inputs and you get some defined outputs. Beautiful charts you produce without understanding what are the cause-effect relationships. And if you don't understand cause-effect relationships, what kind of environmental management plan you can develop. You can develop a meaningful environmental management plan only when you proceed like this. There are industrial activities, there are commercial activities, there are residential activities like that. You can have various activities which produce what air, water and soil pollution. And then you have to develop appropriate bioindicators to find out what exactly is the kind of impact. And then you do comparison with national, international or local standards wherever possible. So there is a generation of potential and above you have sink potential, which I was talking about in the morning. For instance, the impact on air environment, emissions of dust and gases during construction and cargo handling, VOC emissions from liquid cargo handling, accidental releases of toxic gases, explosions, fumes, odors, and hazardous airborne emissions. This is the carbon cycle. So you can imagine, just every arrow can produce one PhD. But no PhD in India is being done on these arrows. That's why we cannot produce Arjunas in the field of academics. They are worried about something else. How PhD is being produced, what guide has earlier done, what my predecessor has done. So some collect some similar information and put it in a thesis form and get PhD awarded. No one is either interested in science nor is interested in reinventing something else. They are just interested in doing their formalities. Even universities, because many times if there is a bright candidate also, he is stifled by the university and institutional regulations because he has to follow that path only. You cannot liberate your mind for thinking into a totally innovative way. All the time we are inviting innovation and creativity from students. Very rarely we are providing them the environment for doing innovation and creativity. We are all the time trying to, through regulations and rules, we are stifling their mental abilities and IQ wherever possible. Now, PhD problems would be related to these kind of concepts. Then they will do some meaningful. If one arrow has got disrupted, what is happening in terms of pollution? Sometimes this arrow has got disrupted, so that has to be tackled. So you will have a different kind of cause and effect relationship for this arrow, different for this. All arrows are not same, and then that kind of PhD should be produced. But no one is bothered. Look at all, very rarely the PhDs produced in environmental science and engineering would be worthy of mention. And people in the same institution also do not remember what are those worth mentioning PhDs generated from them. What use is doing this academics? You think over it. But if we have not been able to remediate apart from bioremediation for which you people are waiting, this academic remediation has to be done, otherwise we will not reach anywhere. Otherwise the problems will be Indian problems and we will be trying to locate the solutions in the United States of America. Very rarely we will get those solutions. So this, if you enlarge that in chemical form, so the carbon cycle would look like that. So these kind of, and you see the predator-prey relationship about which I was talking about in the morning. So you have this terrestrial ecosystem, food chain and predator-prey relationship, how it impacts and how the different cycling goes. And we are just indulging in, if you look at this diagram, you will find out whatever environmental management plans or environmental study which we are doing, we are not doing more than surface scratching exercise. Because who is dealing with the holological system, the integrated system in its entire complexity? Very rarely. And then what use it is. So you see the complexity of atmospheric interactions of pollutants, of the dispersion, dilution and all this phenomena. And this is what needs to be done for NCR reason. But are we doing it? We are indulging in various strange kind of debates, or even not even what parali burning and this. One has to do this integrated assessment, source of ocean and studies, cause-effect relationships, then only you will arrive at some meaningful contribution. Maybe initially you will make some mistakes. Everyone has done a mistake. When Dalton said atom is indivisible, people believed it is indivisible. But later on it was found that no, it is not so. It has got electron, proton and all, it can be divided. Everyone can do a mistake, but you have to start in a logical way, in a scientific way. If you just go on hitting some bullet points here and there, then it will not serve the purposes. That means we have to, have you heard of something called Sand Ki Aankh? There is a movie has come. Okay, so we have to hit the bull's eye. When I saw this, and it was coming on Kapil Sharma show, Sand Ki Aankh, so I really didn't understand this jargon, because in Hindi we rarely come across this phrase. So I started exploring. So I found actually it is a translation of bull's eye. तो उसको हिंदी में they have सांड की आँख. So that means only when you are able to hit the bull's eye, you will be able to develop a meaningful environmental management plan. So these are some slides. I think this you can be later on. In fact, I will quickly show you the scope for uncertainty. Even this is the slide by IPCC quantification, and you see what are the problems with emission factors and what kind of uncertainties would be given even on those globally, internationally available, recognized and respected reports. There is so much of scope for uncertainty. Uncertainty analysis and dealing with uncertainty is itself a very major challenge, academic challenge these days. So you have inappropriate default values given in IPCC, default data not suitable for national circumstances, lack of emission factors at disaggregated level, lack of availability of methane conversion factors for certain regions, low reliability and high uncertainty of data, lack of emission factors. And this is from IPCC report only. Then you have this, how much we are dependent economically on coastal areas, why we need to protect. So containers, packaging, fish meal, wood, staves and sleepers, machinery, metal manufacturing, all this fuel, fish, cars, so much dependence on there, so many activities are there. And there are different shipping operations. So these are the kind of data which we collected initially. So industrial waste discharge to ocean, sewage sludge discharge, other disposal and dredging, then type and size of vessel, transportation costs, lot of some functions we developed ourselves and used for BOD dependent, COD dependent methane emission potential, then issues related with carbon and ecological footprints. Then we did one uncertainty analysis. This I presented in Vienna in one of those. The conference name itself was Uncertainties in Greenhouse Gas Emissions. So these are some uncertainty graphs. Then we developed something called spatio-temporal emission factors for carbon and ecological footprinting. Then there was a methodology we applied. And main advantage is this is Mumbai port study, one of those port authorities. I enjoyed that study actually. We did for that, we did some, for them the data was not available, but international data was available. We did some data mining exercise and we did some quantification of carbon footprint due to different activities, port activities. So these are Rotterdam port, Koper port, Oslo. Then we compared the minimum and maximum of different ports. And then some cost benefit analysis related to paper industry. This was a ecosystem health card. Based on these issues, the carbon and ecological footprint, generation, assimilation of potential, unless until we have region-specific environment health, we cannot develop environmental management plan. And when you have region-specific environment health cards, so much of cost it saves. So presently what is happening is, suppose for Hazira region, one industry has to do some industrial setup, so it goes and collects some baseline information. Another industry has to do some intervention there. They also go and collect the same baseline information. So both of them, and then if third industry is there, there are areas where so many industries are together there. For the same data, all of them are wasting their money, time and human resources. Now, if one's district collector or district level health card is there, all this data collection exercise is not required. You have that card, beyond which how your activity is going to impact is what is to be quantified. That is environmental impact assessment. And that kind of assessment would be more meaningful. This particular activity is going to lead to this particular kind of an impact, rather than collecting the same kind of information every time. You are suffering from some heart-related disease, you go to the doctor, he starts counting your hairs. This is how environmental impact assessment is presently being done. So much of biological information will be then which is not needed. All those 1 million species is not required to be there. When you are suffering from heart-related problem, ECG is required, your blood pressure has to be monitored, your sugar level has to be found out, some 4 or 5 such parameters, and then the doctor will be able to prescribe you the right medicine. But what is that we are doing in environmental impact assessment? Every time the same kind of information is being collected. So our environmental impact assessment, like primary education, should be totally revamped. It's not serving any purpose. You have to get into the sensitive analysis and specific issues to really draw a meaningful conclusion in terms of environmental impact assessment and region-specific environmental management plans. Otherwise, we are wasting natural resources. Maybe we are creating more pollution than we are able to solve in the name of environmental impact assessment reports. This is what I talked about, measure of resilience. If you are able to deal with the ecosystem within the resilience limits, you are lucky. If you cross the limits, probably we have crossed, like Bombay mangroves, you saw it has crossed that limit, then your manifestations would be like that. The appropriate bioindicators will be there for you to draw the impact quantification. Then what are the issues? There are issues, some remediation, someone was talking about phytoremediation can be taken recourse to, but it has got, every technology has got its limits. Doctors, there is a doctor, heart specialist, but can he cure all the heart patients in the city? There is a limit. Similarly with all these technologies, how much they will be able to cure, in what area they will cure, which are the ecosystems they can deal with. You have to properly, just because you have come across a technology which serves a purpose somewhere, you go on applying everywhere, that's not going to solve your problem. When two brothers go to the doctor with the similar symptoms, the doctor prescribes different medicines to two brothers. Because it depends on your assimilation, your dietary habits, your constitution, your requirements. So similarly with the ecosystem, the problem, the technologies are there. But mostly the technologies are able to solve the problems in terms of micrograms and milligrams. And I told you we are generating pollution in terms of billion tons. So whether you find fault with the technology or find fault with the consumption behavior, ultimately even IPCC came out with the same conclusion. Unless until we change our lifestyle patterns, we are not able to tackle the menace of environmental pollution, the demon of environmental pollution. So the solution lies within us, like yogis also say, the solution is within us, and we are looking for solutions outside. Many times when people ask me, I tell them, instead of criticizing the government, industry, outside world and all, you just do one exercise. You make yourself become selfish. Don't worry about anyone. Your brothers, sisters, family, society, don't worry about anyone. Just remediate yourself. Make yourself a responsible citizen of the country. Just yourself. Should be the easiest job. Okay? Then if everyone does it, our country would be so beautiful. But we are not able to do that. And then we expect that someone else on whose shoulders there is a responsibility of 130 or 125 crore, he will solve our problems. We are not able to solve our own problems. We cannot make ourselves responsible, and the responsibility in terms of carbon footprint and ecological footprint, if we are aware that every next step which we are taking must generate lower carbon and ecological footprint than my previous step, this will really revolutionize the environmental pollution. But we are so careless about it. We'll say, "Arey, theek hai, plastic. I am not the only person who is generating. So many people will take care of it. Ek maine फेंक दिया तो क्या होता? Let me have the car." There are people who are going on cycles. Why I should worry about it? See, the air pollution problem, simple solution is there. Now many ministers are riding cycle in Delhi. Simple solution is there. Everyone goes on cycle. But are we following? Are we ready to follow? Children are also not ready to move on cycles these days. Those who come from affluent class, they will not go on scooter also. They want car. So everyone wants a car. And then we will blame Punjab for Parali. Whatever is the situation, whosoever is the culprit, when I am facing a pollution problem, at least pollution in my house has to be reduced. We have to reduce wherever the problem was generated. But if I am suffering problem here, suffocation, then I have to reduce at least my emission here. But people are not ready to do what you can do. So find a fault with the other people. So these are somewhere they have already applied this, limited success has been there. We can apply that, but I think prevention is better than cure. Because it's no use becoming a heart patient and then going to the great heart specialist and contacting human Delhi. Better to avoid heart disease. So this is what ultimately I will prescribe, and with these. There are so many other slides, you just have a look at it. Some of our own papers, development of a dynamic and predictive model for ecological printing. This is when I was coordinating climate change program. We have our Dr. Mitra. He was the pioneer of Indian climate change program. He was long time back. He was the Director General of CSIR, and he was the national coordinator for climate change program. On his behalf, I was coordinating for CSIR, and these are some of contributions we had in international geosphere program. So now we have started some outreach activities for which you have these slides, and then there are a lot of issues connected with CRZ and all. This we will take up later on sometime when there is a time. Different regulations in 2011, 2019 and all that. So ship in search of sustainable development. This is how we are. Can money save us from drowning? This is not my slide. Even internationally also there is some thinking. It has been left to our generation to discover that you can move heaven and earth to save 5 minutes and then not have the faintest idea what to do with them when you have saved them. Most of us are suffering from this problem. To get all there is out of living, we must employ our time wisely, never being in too much of a hurry to stop and sip life, but never losing our sense of the enormous value of a minute. So it doesn't mean that just I come somewhere and so I have done the job. So you have to do the right job at the right moment. The child has to be born after 9 months. Wait for 9 months. Don't abort the process. In most of the problem, I tell, if solution for industry is actually like family planning we are following, we must follow industrial planning. An industrial ecology that is supposed to be the paramount solution for pollution problem is, ecology means there is a biorhythm. All species go to sleep. So industry must come to a halt sometime. You just cannot perpetuate its being. And that is what we are doing. Just a cow is giving milk. So from morning to the evening, will you be milking the cow? This is what we are doing in terms of industrial production. So some such lectures I gave on some, I think this was 2014 or so, 2010. Industrial ecology I already talked to you about. So this is how environmental impact assessment should be done for different processes. When we talk of sustainable development, we forget whether it is for the fish, for the bird, or for this fellow. This is Udaipur slide. You will be surprised. Udaipur is one of our most beautiful tourist spot, but you can have these kind of situations in Udaipur also. So when we talk of sustainable development, are we really worried for whom? Whose sustainable development are we talking? We talk of biodiversity. We talk of biodiversity. A simple solution is become vegetarian. Don't kill other species. Am I right? But will the non-vegetarians agree? I also don't want them to agree. But then why do this drama of biodiversity conservation? Then accept we have to indulge in predator-prey relationship. This is the essential mechanism through which we have to live. Without killing a goat or a deer, lion cannot survive, then kill. Rather than making a pretension I am doing biodiversity, on the other side, gleefully I am eating fish in the evening. Most of our environmental solutions are not coming about because we are indulging in these paradoxical pretensions time and again. We did some outreach exercises long time back. So I think this is the end of it. It has reached my assimilative capacity. Thank you very much for patient hearing. If you have any queries, it will be my pleasure to interact with you.
So thank you, sir, for giving a wonderful lecture.